Before we begin, there is a standard health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire drill sounding, we need to leave the chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park and wait there for further instructions. This meeting is being streamed live via the County Council's website. All your comments will remain accessible online after the meeting and can be reported by the media. With this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and the press in our meeting today. Can I remind everybody to ensure their mobiles and laptops and iPads are silenced during this meeting, and the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collaborated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and we'll make a note. We will now move to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Joseph, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor Alan Woodruff. We've also received notice that the Conservative group vacancy on the committee will be filled by Councillor Rob Kendrick until further notice, as under Regulations 13 of the Local Government Committee and Political Groups Regulation Act 1990.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2, declarations of members' interests. Do we have any other members to declare any interests? No. No declare of interest, that's good. Okay, moving to item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting of the Committee Safety Scrutiny Committee held on the 25th of November 2025. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting of the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee held on the 25th of November 2025 as a correct record. The minutes can be found on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Yep, Councillor Christopher, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Bamford, thank you. We will all now vote. Those all in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? And any abstentions? Okay. Thank you, and those minutes are agreed as a correct record. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive, Councillors and Lead Officers. A visit to Wallington Training Centre on March 2026. This is just a reminder of the committee's scheduled visit to the Wallington Training Centre on Friday the 20th of March 2026 at 9:30 to 1 p.m. Are there any Executive Councillor announcements from Councillor Alex McGonigal, Executive Councillor Chairman for the Committee Safety, or Councillor Manza Hassan on his behalf? Nothing, thank you. Finally, are there any announcements for any senior officers if present in the chambers? These could be Martin Parker, Assistant Director, Public Protection, or Mark Baxter, Fire Chief Officer, or Ryan Stacey, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, on his behalf. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First, I'd just like to have an introduction, a warm welcome to our new Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Joe Horsted, following a robust recruitment process we did a couple of months ago, where we had a list of outstanding candidates coming through into Lincolnshire. Really pleased that Joe has been successful, and you'll be seeing him attending in the future Community Safety Scrutiny Committee meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the main items of business. We will first sit as a Community Safety Scrutiny Committee for items 5, 6, 7 and 8 on the agenda. Item 5, Revenue and Capital Budget Proposals 2026 to 27. This report also provides an overall and revenue of the capital budget proposals for the years 2026 to 27 for community safety services. Actions required. The actions required by the committee are to consider this report and make comments on the budget proposals. These will be considered by the executive at its meeting on the 3rd of February. The report will be presented by Martin Parker, Assistant Director of Community Protection and Commissions, and Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer. Over to you, Martin.
I'm going to defer first, Chair, if you don't mind, to Pam, just to give us an overview as a starter, and then Mark and I will go into the detail, if that's okay. Yep.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Just to do a brief introduction to the report that touched on a bit of the process that we've gone through. So following the publication of the budget proposal last week for the budget for the 1st of April 2026 to the 31st of March 2027, the report in front of you forms part of the consultation that has been undertaken through the Scrutiny Committee process. The starting point for the budget proposals was the budget that was set in February 2025. And the comments from today will go through into the full council meeting in February. The report in front of you contains both the revenue updated position and the capital updated position for those services within the community safety scrutiny's remit, which are the fire service and the public protection. And so with that, I'll hand over to Mark to go through the fire services budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So as outlined in the report, Fire and Rescue, we're looking at the cost pressure of about 2.749 million. Really, that's primarily focusing on recognising there's an increasing demand for fire and rescue service activities, and really also ensuring supporting predominantly within our on-call cadre to ensure that we've got the right amount of capabilities and capacities to be able to meet the increasing demand that we are seeing in operational incidents, and as that trend is growing across the county of Lincolnshire. Some specific points of note, we are looking at using that investment to ensure that we have the adequate training requirements to ensure that our operational firefighters and supervisory leaders have the adequate amount of skills, knowledge, and meet the national standards that are also coming out of the Grenfell Tower and Manchester Arena inquiries. There's a specific focus in regards to how we train our incident commanders to ensure that they have, again, all the right skills to be able to meet these increasing demands. We also have some investment in regards to our whole-time firefighters. We've come to a period of time where we have some vacancies that will be coming up within the next 12 to 24 months. So we will be going out for a whole-time recruitment course post-April of this year to ensure that we meet our minimum levels of establishment. We will be assessing this on a year-on-year basis, so it won't necessarily mean an additional cost pressure every year. We'll be continually monitoring our staffing establishments and require whole-time course as and when that is needed. We've also, which I touched on in regards to the increasing costs in regards to our operational demand. As many of you know, we are predominantly served by our on-call firefighters. So every time they turn out to operation incidents, they have an additional cost for them. So every time they get turned out, they get paid by the hour. So from some national agreements in pay and conditions from last year, there's been a change in regards to how our on-call firefighters have been remunerated, and I would like to say rightly so, as there has been a reflection on their dedication that they have in regards to our local communities. But we've also seen an increase in regards to the amount of operational incidents, but also the amount of time that our operational firefighters are having to be at some of our more complex and demanding incidents, which increases the costs of our operational response modelling. There is also a note that we do have cost pressures linked to the pensions that as allocated across all of our staff. We do normally get a pension grant fund coming through from Home Office. That isn't always guaranteed, and we don't get confirmation of that until post budget settings. So we've earmarked that as a cost pressure that may well be offset with government granting that comes through later on the year, and then we'll be able to identify that may be a relief of some of that cost pressure in regards to that area. And finally, there is an investment. We are looking at increasing our on-call establishment. We know that availability within our on-call has been one of our challenges for a number of years. I'm pleased to say that we've stabilised our availability across the service. However, to ensure that we continue to meet our response standards and we continue to meet the needs of our local communities, we do need to increase our on-call establishment to ensure that our on-call stations have a suitable amount of operational staff. So we are increasing our recruits course for our on-call over the next 12 months to try and meet that level of demand. So if you would like me to pause at that point in regards to revenue, or I'm happy to go straight onto the capital requirements. Yep, so in regards to capital, again, we're looking at an additional 4.4 million in regards to the capital programme. We've done a lot of work over the last year or so to refresh our capital programme. So we now have a planning assumption over a 10-year period for what our capital requirements, and we've been quite challenging in regards to our requirements, and we've reassessed the replacement of essential equipment and appliances to ensure that it is appropriate, and we're not just replacing like for like when the manufacturer's recommendations are. We've actually based it on the requirements of our need and also the risk within our county. So what that means is we've been able to extend our capital programme to make it a far more efficient programme over the next 10 years. But for what we're looking for the next year, we are looking on a replacement programme of 9 of our fire appliances. Some of our fire appliances have reached, coming up to reach of end of life. We have an opportunity to replace this essential piece of equipment on our appliances. These are our first line of attack when we respond to the various amounts of operational incidents across the county. We will be reviewing the requirements for these appliances to ensure that they're modern, they are fit for purpose, and they have the appropriate levels of equipment that are, again, meeting the modern needs of our risks within the county. We're also looking at the investment in battery-powered cutting tools, pumps, to ensure that it gives us an operational efficiency. This is our essential piece of equipment, which is primarily going to be used when we're going to the many unfortunate road traffic collisions across the county. So our firefighters have the right amount of equipment that they're able to extricate people out of cars and vehicles in the most efficient amount of time. And then we recognise there's a growing agenda in regards to ensuring the safety of our firefighters within the contaminants agenda is being addressed. There is a swell of work and evidence that's recognising that the dangers for firefighters in long term that relates to contaminants that may enter into firefighters' bodies from the prolonged exposure within the fire environment. We need to ensure that we've got the right kit and equipment, but also the investment on some of our fire stations to ensure that we've got clean and dirty areas, so we reduce and minimise cross-contamination into clean areas, so it keeps the safety of our firefighters at the heart of what we are doing. And then the general replacement of our standard equipment, ladders, fire hoses, lots of all the multitude imagine equipment that we have is just a standard replacement programme that we require in there. And then the final element that we're looking at investment on is having dashcam and CCTV technology on all of our fleet. So that enables us to ensure that we have records and accurate information that helps us learning in regards to when we are responding to operational incidents, but also when we're also at operational incidents. And again, that helps us in regards to the safety and the welfare of all of our responding crews as well. So I'll pause at that point, Chair. That's just an overview of our revenue and capital requirements, and open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take the committee members through the public protection budget. Thankfully for committee members, it will be slightly shorter than the fire one. So just in relation to public protection, for our 25-26 budget, we had a budget of £6.3 million. We are looking to be on budget coming into this year with a forecast budget for 26-27 of £7.9 million. Now, whilst to committee members that sounds like that's an increase, that increase is born out of funding changes that have come from the government in relation to the Domestic Abuse Safe Accommodation Grant consolidation, which is £1.8 million. What the service is projecting for or proposing for 26-27 is that we have a cost pressure of £235,000 measured against a savings of £523,000, which gives us a net reduction to the 24-25 budget going into the 26-27 budget of £287,000. That's then not including the 1.8 million that we get from a grant that pays for our domestic abuse accommodation statutory duties. Just to break that down into the relevant three services that make up the public protection budget. So the community safety budget is £1.9 million, which is showing one of the cost pressures of £66,000. This is in relation to bringing the chair of the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board into the core budget of community safety, where it previously sat within adults. There is a cost savings of £105,000 proposed within the community safety budget, which is in relation to a number of posts that have been reviewed and are being dealt with differently in terms of the work that was being picked up. And then obviously the funding of the 1.8 million comes into that because it's our community safety teams that deal with the domestic abuse safe accommodation grant funding, and we've maximised the totality of that fund in terms of discharging our duties under the DA Act. So therefore the community safety final proposed budget is 3.8 million for 26-27. In terms of trading standards, their starting budget for 25-26 is 1.8 million. A savings of £132,000, which is around realignment of staff and mainly management costs, which is then a proposed budget of £1.6 million. Registration and coroners as a starting budget of 25-26 of £2.4 million, cost pressure of £169,000, which is born out of our contracts with post-mortems and body storage in relation to inflation and other costs included. However, there is a savings of £285,000, which helps offset that 169 pressure. So therefore the proposed budget for 26-27 is 2.3 million. The other budget that the final piece of the budget that makes up the 7.9 budget is the assistant director, i.e. me. So you're very welcome to cut that if you wish, and allow my heads of service to provide the update. So overall, again, as I say, a positive position for public protection in that our 25-26 forecast budget is on target, no overspend, no underspend, and we're proposing a net reduction to budget of 287. What I will say is that the public protection budget is mainly staffing costs. We have very few contracts that sit within there. The domestic abuse contracts that we have are all funded through the DA grant of the 1.8 million, and the other contracts that we have sit within the, as I've said, the post-mortems and toxicology within the coroner service. So again, ours is a very people-based budget. Thank you, Chair. Happy for questions.
Thank you, Martin and Mark. I would like to now invite members of the committee to speak on this item. Vice Chairman, do we have any speakers? Councillor Bridgewood.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, regarding the fire and rescue budget, you've mentioned cost pressures coming from Grenfell and Manchester, but there's no mention of cost pressures driven by changes to our infrastructure in terms of the number of solar farms and the supporting infrastructure for that, BESS and that. You've also touched on breathing apparatus, which is critical with lithium-ion battery fires, and also cross-contamination, which again is an important thing with lithium-ion, in addition to the general network. We've got increases in battery vehicles, so there's that infrastructure as well. Seems to me that potentially is a massive cost implication, but it's not really mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So in regards to the impact of solar power farms, how we respond and the infrastructure that we have in fire and rescue, that won't have a direct impact in regards to the resource and the knowledge and skills to be able to respond to those types of incidents. So if there was an increase in regards to the infrastructure, it won't directly relate to actually having different equipment and more equipment, because we already have that in place. In regards to will that have a level of increase in regards to demand of operational incidents, our planning assumptions with the work that we've been linking in at a national level with the National Fire Chiefs Council and monitoring trends that are going across the country, we're not seeing any significant increase in demand of incidents that are relating to those increases in infrastructure within the county. So it is an area that we are monitoring very closely, and we are linked in where appropriately with planning applications to ensure that we do ensure that they meet the minimum requirements of the National Fire Chiefs Council in regards to fire safety. So in regards to the risk and demand, we feel we're in a position where we've already got the resources to be able to respond to that for the County of Lincolnshire.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a number of questions, but I hope you'll bear with me because this is scrutiny after all. First of all, welcome, Joe. Welcome to our committee. We ask a lot of questions, but we're very supportive. They're questions for all three of the people who've spoken. The first one is, I think potentially there's a positive message for the service. I'd like to know, first of all, Pam, how much extra have we got to spend in this area as a result of the government funding, and also the pension changes, because I believe that there's an extra, is it 9 million going into the council budget, because of the way pensions are structured. So that's a plus, as well as the fairer funding money. So can you tell me for each of those areas what's the extra money we're getting for that, please? My second question, I suppose this really is to Mark. Does flooding, and I'm sure it does, impact on the resources which are needed to meet the needs on the service, and how much is that sort of costing this year? Because again, I've always been a long supporter of that being funded separately, and you know that, whoever's in government. Can you explain the changes to how on-call firefighters are being paid, please? The next one, 2.12 on page 4 and 2.12 and 214 talks about a net saving of 0.287 million. Can you tell me what the savings are and the efficiencies are? And 2.17 talks about operational efficiencies. What I'm really getting at is, are there going to be cuts, or what's quaintly termed as remodelling of the service? Can you tell me if there are any changes to what had been previously planned? Totally agree with your comments on contamination, because I think as far back as Grenfell and my association there, the carcinogens in the air around fires cause really big problems, so totally support that. Then increasing government funding in terms of what Martin said, again, for things like domestic abuse and that, down to the fair funding review. Can you tell me how much the extra funding? I'm sorry if it's in here, but it's sometimes hard to pick all the numbers out. And again, in terms of what Martin said, are there any cuts to services, remodelling of the service, or any posts being decommissioned? Which schemes are no longer progressing? That's point 42 on page 6, please. Basically, I want to know what we've got, how much extra we've got, and what's been cut, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start, and then apologies if we miss anything out, Councillor Lee. So in terms of the budget process, the way we work throughout is our finance teams will work alongside the service leads, so Mark and Martin in this case, and the service will review everything that they currently have and everything that's coming up, as Mark refers to the Fire Council it's been working alongside, to understand what costs and abilities they need to deliver their services going forward. And that comes through then into pressures going in as proposals into the initial budget process. Running alongside that, we also ask for reviews of efficiencies, reviews of income to make sure we are appropriately reflecting things like inflation, cost pressures that are for our statutory duties, and then what our infrastructure for costs and income are for our non-statutory duties. All of that comes together across the council, so not just fire and public protection, adults, children's resources, all services that we deliver. Whilst our services are doing that, we run alongside with the government work that's published around the provisional settlement. So what does the funding look like? How is that behaving as we go into 26-27? We have had significant change. All local authorities have had significant change through the fair funding. And that's what we've seen by in the comment for funding changes when Martin has referred to the DA grant. What it means is they've taken into account things like deprivation of councils, they've taken those sorts of things into account, and they've taken into account where we've got multiple grants before, and they've consolidated them into our funding. What then happens as part of the process, the funding arm comes together with what the services are telling us to produce a gap. Yes, we got a cost saving of just over £9 million within the pensions. We don't get a split of what our funding goes into each team. So we take the funding overall for Lincolnshire County Council compared to what the services are telling us, and that generates the gap that we then need to work as a council to close that gap and propose a balanced budget, which is what you've got in front of you. So we don't actually allocate what's going in or down, but what the table shows on page 3 is the outcome of that is your fire service proposal is to go from 29.7 to your 32.4. And your public protection is to go from 6.3 to 7.9, recognising that the 1.8 DA grant isn't actually new funding, it's taking it from grant funding directly received into our funding formula. So that's just a fairer funding issue. But the outcome all of that is that shift from one to the other, and the proposed budget proposal that was released last week proposes that balanced budget, as including the pensions and the fairer funding and the cost pressures and efficiencies that both Mark and Martin have put forward.
Can I just say, how much extra have we had then for fairer funding? Do we get that for this service, or is it, like you say, for everything?
It's for everything. So the table in the, which I can send back round, the table in the budget that was published last week, has that within it, and I can find that and send that round separately.
I'll go next. So yeah, just I'll deal with the domestic abuse element first, if that's okay. So Pam's right. So the domestic abuse grant was rolled into 3 specific grants from government, homelessness and rough sleeping, combined with the DA grant. Because we operate as obviously a 2-tier authority area, it's not Lincolnshire County Council's statutory duty in relation to homelessness and rough sleeping. That sits with the district councils. So whilst our funding formula is rolled up into one grant, the 1.8 million DA funding that we have this year is in line with the DA grant funding that we had last year, which actually saw in itself a rise when the government came into power last year. So it's a same funding as we had last year. The positive about that is a guaranteed 3-year funding. So rather than waiting year on year, it's actually scheduled in for 3 years, which is a change and a positive position for us to be able to plan and utilise that funding. In terms of the savings plans and does this mean what are we cutting, what we've actually been able to do is we've maximised elements of the merger with Greater Lincolnshire Coronial Service in terms of reducing some of our assistant coroners' costs that both see Greater Lincolnshire, so North and North East Lincolnshire and LCC making savings as a result of that merger in terms of the assistant coroners. We've also taken away the core funding that LCC pays for the registration service, which now becomes a purely income paid for service in itself. So actually it's a kind of a cost neutral service. We have a statutory duty to deliver registration services, of which James will take you through later in the committee. LCC used to pay for core staffing costs out of that. We've removed that, recognising that we are making that an income generated service, so it becomes a cost neutral element. In relation to staffing posts, there are some staffing posts that have been removed, but these have been assessed by the service and not deemed to be a risk or a degradation of our service delivery and our statutory duties as a council.
You said about transferring a cost over. Does that mean that the public pay more? How does that work?
Yeah, sorry, is that in relation to the DA grant?
You said that there was a core grant that we're not going to pay anymore or something.
Yeah, out of core budget. So we used to pay for registration staff from LCC core budget. So we don't take that core budget from LCC anymore. The income that we make through registration services and ceremonies pays for the service. Yeah, so the funding we get from certification and marriages pays for the service. Yeah, in short, nobody's paying extra.
Okay, Councillor Lee, I think I've picked up the couple of the relating to fire in regards to flooding. So when we are looking at building the budget for each year, we go into quite a lot of detail in regards to planning assumptions, in regards to our operational response. We link in regards to historic data. We look at predictions as best we can in regards to where high risk areas are, and within the budget setting, we've articulated what our expectation is in regards to our wholesale response budget requirements. We will include when we're responding to areas such as flooding. What we also do is, if we do have exceptional events from severe weather that are over and above our expectations, our planning assumptions, we have the ability that we've been able to put in a bid from the contingency funding, because when it has been an exceptional year. And the next level in regards to that, such as when we've had incidents from, remember the beast from the east, and also when we had the Wainfleet floodings, because Fire and Rescue is identified as an organisation that can access Belwyn funding, which links in regards to if costs go above your 2% revenue budget for the year, then we are the ability to access government funding to ease some of that burden. But they are in extremely exceptional events. So we have a layered approach in regards to trying to meet those increasing demands. To touch on the question in regards to how the on-call pay bands have changed, previously, and this was about nearly 18 months, well, just over a year ago, sorry, there was a national agreement that came in place where historically, if you was an on-call firefighter, your retaining fee was just in two bands. If you gave less than 120 hours a week, you would be having a letter rate which I believe was 7.5%. And if you give more than 120 hours, then you get the enhanced rate of 10% on a retaining fee. To try and attract and to also to reflect on the different levels of cover that individuals give, that has now been broken down to 4 levels of bandings. So get a different percentage rate if you provide up to 30 hours a week, a higher rate up to 60 hours a week, then up to 90 hours a week, and then up to 119 hours, and then finally if you give more than 120 hours. What this does, it gives a better reflection on the commitment that our on-call firefighters give, and it also gives them a more appropriate annual retaining fee allocated to that, which is a fairer way of paying our on-call firefighters, but it doesn't give us an increased cost pressure in regard to our baseline costs for our on-call cadre.
I asked as well if anything had been cut in the fire.
In regards to cuts, no, nothing's been, we are not looking at cuts. We're trying to looking through a future plan where we've stabilised our resources, and we're looking at future work to try and, so looking at the risk to potentially increase in regards to our operational response cadre.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just got a few questions. So it's amazing to see the 4.4 million investment in the modern fire fleet and equipment. What specific new technologies or enhancements are provided on these new response units? And what will happen to the oldest vehicles? Are we able to recoup funds from recycling parts from the old units, for example?
We've got a project team that are in the process of doing a lot of innovation and evaluation across the sector to look at where technologies can enhance. We are looking at the technologies relating to battery powered, as I mentioned in there, because I think that is a real improvement in regards to how we're supporting our communities and response. Why is that important? We'll just give a practical example of one of the benefits. If you are ever unfortunate enough to be in a road traffic collision, when we turn up and we are looking at trying to extricate people out of cars, one of the things people will notice the amount of noise and volume and the fumes that are coming on our very large, heavy generators that are next to the cars isn't a great experience already. Going to battery powered operated, they're more flexible, they're easier to use, they'll be quieter, so it will be person-centred in regards to our response, so it will be a tangible improvement there. We're also been investing a lot of technologies in regards to our command support functions to ensure we've got stronger communications that'll give us better situational awareness, so we can share information across teams and share informations through our control centre to ensure that we can respond with the most appropriate resources in the shortest amount of time. But we're continually reviewing our equipment to ensure that it is fit for purpose, more lightweight, more flexible, that reflects our modern firefighter cadre within the service.
Brilliant, thank you. And just the what are we doing with the oldest vehicle?
Sorry again. Sorry. Yeah, the older vehicles. Sorry, I knew there was a second part of the question. Forgive me on. So yeah, we link in regards to LCD commercial and with any vehicle in the fleet. There's a process that we go through for selling them off. They're often ended up in an auction environment where they get sold off, and that capital receipt goes back into the county council.
Brilliant, thank you. And just one more question. So the investment in the dashcam and CCTV technology across its fleet, why was this not included in the 2025-26 budget as a reaction to these incidents? And in terms of numbers, how much will the CCTV coverage increase by?
In regards to the exact figures, I will have to come back to you on in regards to that, Councillor, because it's not on. I haven't got it on my notes in regards to that. The reason why it's going in there because we've been doing research in regards to ensuring we've got the most appropriate CCTV and dash cams. It is quite a wide sector out there in regards to what is available. So we've been going through research and procurement process to ensure that we got value for money in regards to that, and we've also been ensuring that we are linked in regards to other policies in regards to how we maintain and manage the information that will be on the CCTVs to ensure that we are adhering to all of our information governance policies as well. So we've been going through that process to ensure that we got due diligence in regards to we got the appropriate policies in place before we put those important piece of equipment on our appliances.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. While I was going through this, I was having a look online and I noted that there was a national issue stating that there were fewer than 30 fully competent fire engineers in the country at the moment, which was a bit of a concern, especially when you give rise to the importance of those roles and how they're going to be guiding us. So given that shortage, my understanding from reading this is that there's sort of 187,000 within this budget for training increases, and I'm just wondering if any is ring-fenced for fire safety assessors, especially with the requirements now for dealing with the incident of Grenfell and whatever, all these things that are coming down the line. We need to make sure there's fire safety assessors, and I think last meeting that you were in, that sort of came up as well, that there was a shortage of fire safety assessors that are trained. There's a skills gap there, and it seems like something that we need to look into. So I'd be interested to learn more on that. What else have we got down here? So on-call availability, so it's stating that it's sort of at the lowest point in 5 years, 344,000 to increase on-call personnel is my interpretation of it. is that likely to sort of just wipe our nose clean? Is that going to get us out ahead of the problem, or are we going to see potentially a gradual decline at that level? Is it enough to get on top of that? And then with regards to the fleet replacement, so we, I think it's 9 vehicles, whatever it is. Do we know how many vehicles we've got that are getting up to the sort of recommended life expectancy? Have we got any others? Is this something that we need to be looking at and making sure, if possible, we're planning ahead of now? And that's it. Sorry, I'm hitting one. Martin answered 2 of my other questions earlier, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll pick these up in the right order. No, really, useful observation in regards to the investment we need for our fire protection teams. So in a short answer, in regards to the budget that we've looked in regards to training, part of that is absolutely about supporting fire protection officers. We have a robust plan that again meets the National Fire Chiefs Council requirements in regards to qualifications that we require for our inspection and enforcement officers. In regards to fire engineers, we are already investing in our staff to bring them through the qualifications to enable them to have those fire engineer qualifications. You're absolutely right. The demand for fire engineering across the whole sector is really high. So we took the proactive decision of investing in our own staff to bring them up to the right level of standard. So it's quite an in-depth programme that they'll be going through. But it's not all from County Council funding. So we are utilising government granting from the Grenfell Tower inquiry that we've been able to utilise in regards to training our fire protection officers as well. So it's a blended approach in regards to how we are financing that area. The question in regards to the on-call establishment, the planning assumption that we're going through at the moment, it is our expectation that this actually will start to improve our on-call and availability. You're absolutely right. It's been on a decline, if I'm honest with you, probably for the last 10 years. But we have noticed in regards to, and there are elements such as we touched on in regards to how we're paying some of our on-call, and also we've been a lot of focused work in regards to putting together on-call staffing groups to try to understand more about their needs and the reasons and how we can improve retention, how we can improve their work experience. That we have seen our on-call availability just recently stabilise and slightly improve. So I think the work that we're doing is making a difference. But this investment in regards to increasing the establishment will be about trying to make improvements. To put this into context, and I might have shared this rough figure with committee before, but probably about 15 to 20 years ago, the expectation life cycle of an on-call firefighter was over 15 years. We're looking at the expectation of an on-call firefighter with their employment with us now is round about 3.5 years. So that's the area where we want to try and keep the retention of our on-call. Recruitment is one issue, it's the retention of our on-call that is really vitally important for us. And then the final question in regards to the fire appliances, it is the 9 vehicles that we've highlighted replacement are the vehicles that we do need to be replacing over the next 2 to 3 years. What I touched on earlier is we've done a deep review of our 10-year capital programme, which has been a review of every single vehicle, light vehicle, fire appliance vehicles, support vehicles, to ensure that we will replace them at the appropriate time. And we have that plan within our 10-year programme to know exactly what year they will be. So I'm confident that we've got a good, robust replacement programme for that.
All right, just to come back briefly, is that okay? Have you isolated what the reason for the low retention rates might be for the on-call fire?
Yeah, so we do an awful lot of engagement with our on-call continually, and I think there's some broad headings in regards to this. I think one of those is societal expectations, and I reflect back. I used to be an on-call firefighter when I joined, as many of you know. Now that was 30 odd years ago. Our local communities operated differently 30 odd years ago, and people didn't tend to move, wasn't as transient. And the industries and the local businesses within our local communities were more established. We had larger employers, and I think economies were probably a little bit more buoyant in regards to they had the flexibility to release people more. fast forward to the local day and age, our local communities are made up very differently. Local businesses and the ability to release people from local areas isn't there how it used to be. I think society is far more transient. People move locations and they move their businesses far more than what they did 30 years ago. And frankly, if one of our on-call firefighters has to move out of the 5-minute circumference that we've historically had, unfortunately, they no longer can serve that local fire station. And so there's a lot of societal issues in regards to it. I think people change jobs, their life changes, circumstances change more rapidly than what they probably did a number of years ago. I think the one thing I can say is we're not getting a trend that people aren't just wanting to work for Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue. They're generally leaving because of external influences within their own lives that doesn't enable them to carry on being an on-call firefighter. So we are looking at addressing that by being more flexible in regards to our requirements, areas where we can recruit from, being more flexible in regards to the amount of time we require people to be within the service. So we are evolving and adapting our offer to people who potentially want to be on call to ensure that actually they all can stay with us and we can be more flexible around their own home and work-life balance.
Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is very interesting, actually. I do sometimes wonder how you manage to juggle all the finances. It must be very hair-raising at times. On that basis, before this committee started, I had a brief conversation with Martin there. We were talking about ASBs. Now, these are something that are raised with me frequently, and I understand that now there has been some success in reducing the number of antisocial behaviour incidents. I think it's just over 6%, Martin said. I was wondering, over what period of time, and is it over the county? Because I was talking specifically about West Lindsey at the time, but is it over the county? Over what period of time has this happened? And are you going to be able to retain the funding and programmes needed to maintain this success?
Yeah, so just in relation to the antisocial behaviour reductions, I will be bringing a paper to future scrutiny, if that's okay, to bring the detail. It is primarily in Gainsborough because it was in Gainsborough where we did the target activity with the community safety teams, with the district councils, policing and other bodies. So that is it's a higher rate of reduction through antisocial behaviour committed by young people than we've seen in other areas of the county, which was a 2.5% reduction. So our kind of positive extra inclusion. The key factor of having a kind of a lift and shift model is to make sure there's sustainable activities that sit behind that within the community, and that will bring more detail in relation to that. But it's not a we do a targeted operation then leave and the ASB continues. It's about how then we integrated the activities that we do with local organisations to make sure that we've got a sustainable process of engagement with those young individuals now that we've almost used that targeted element to get the hook, as it were, into kind of formal intervention activities.
So you are confident going forward that you'll be able to retain the same sort of input?
Yes, absolutely. The way that we have kind of restructured our focus within the Safer Lincolnshire partnership, within the Lincolnshire Domestic Abuse Partnership, in terms of focused outcome-based activities collectively as a group, and then sharing that learning and sustaining that, makes it a more efficient and effective model.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. As a new member, it might be rather obvious questions, but in fact, Councillor Christopher actually asked what I was going to ask, but I just want to maybe extend that point about on-call recruitment. I know from my visits to the station in my division, which I know that the team there, and it's a great crowd of firefighters there, they have had vacancy issues. And it just occurred to me, listening to the discussion, that perhaps if councillors could be made aware of where there might be vacancy factors in stations across the county, we might be able to help in some way through our contacts with local businesses and local community groups to spread the message that being an on-call firefighter is a very worthy occupation and something which is a great support to the community. And so I was just wondering maybe if we could have a briefing note as to the sort of conditions and what's required to be a firefighter on-call, I should say, in Lincolnshire. There may be a possibility that occasionally councillors across the county may be able to assist in supporting your recruitment, or at least we'll be aware of it, so if anybody asks why are there vacancies at our local fire station, we have a better understanding. And obviously I can understand the point you made as regards changes in society. The village I live in, which I've lived in for 30 years, and I knew the original firefighters there 30 years ago, it's changed considerably. So I think there may be an opportunity. It's only a suggestion. You may not regard it as worthwhile, but making councillors aware of the situation in their own divisions, where they do have a fire station, of course, it may be an assistance to your campaign to recruit. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for that offer. Yeah, more than happy to. We can speak with our recruitment team that can pull together a briefing, but also we can just give some signposting. There's information within the Lincolnshire County Council website where Fire and Rescue has a page in regards to that, also has the information in regards to the recruitment of areas as well. But more than happy for our team to pull together a briefing and share that across councillors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion on this item. I propose the committee supports the 2026-27 budget proposals for Committee Community Services, and that we agree to pass on our comments to the Executive for its consideration on the 3rd of February 2026. Can we please raise our hands if we agree? Okay. Thank you, that is agreed. Okay. So,
can I be down as an abstention, please?
Yep. Can we record that? Yep. Thank you. Okay, item 6, Engagement Strategy 2026 to 2030. This report, which is on pages 15 to 44, is the pre-decision scrutiny prior to a decision by the Executive on the 3rd of February 2026 and approval by the County Council on 20th of February 2026. This report provides information on Lincolnshire County Council's engagement strategy review. The actions required by the committee are to consider the attached reports and determine whether they support the recommendations to the Executive and set out on page 15. 2, agree the additional comments to be passed to the Executive in relation to this item. The report will now be presented by Christopher O'Rourke, Head of Communications and Engagement, and Katie Sobstall, Engagement Team Leader, with support from Claire Rowley, Head of Transformation. Over to you, Chris, Kate and Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. So the engagement strategy is part of the Council's corporate policy framework that guides how we operate and make decisions. So the previous engagement strategy ran from 2018 to 2023, so it was last considered by the County Council in May 2018. As it's now reached the end of its lifespan, we've undertaken a review to make sure it remains current and reflects the improvements we've made to the way we consult and engage with residents, and make sure it aligns with statutory guidance, make sure that we're legally compliant when we consult. The revised strategy explains how we'll involve residents, businesses, partners and stakeholders in shaping decisions and shaping our services. So I'll just hand over to Kate to explain the updates in this version of the strategy compared to the previous one.
Thank you. I'll take you through the key updates to the engagement strategy. So we've added links to the council plan showing our commitment to listening to communities and involving them in decisions. We've clarified what we mean by engagement, what we mean by consultation, so that expectations are clear. We're using modern methods, including our engagement platform and new technology to support engagement. And we've also included the aims and objectives with focus on legal compliance and continuous improvement. And we've set out clearly the legal context so that everyone understands the rules that we follow. Overall, this strategy strengthens our commitment to listening and acting on what people tell us, and this helps us build trust and confidence with our communities. All consultation and engagement activities are managed through our platform, Let's Talk Lincolnshire. Right now, the platform has a panel of over 6,000 registered users, and that keeps growing. Most activities don't require registration, but those who do choose to sign up are invited to take part in future surveys and events. Last year, we gathered feedback from more than 13,500 people and organizations across 93 different engagement opportunities, with nearly 86,000 of page visits across those projects. These contributions are vital in shaping better outcomes for our communities. Of course, we also offer other ways to take part, so whether it's by phone or paper or different formats. We offer focus groups and we hold drop-in events. Last year, we held more than 30 face-to-face engagement events across the county on various topics. For example, the local government reorganisation, cycling provision, and highways improvements. The proposed strategy is will go to the executive on the 3rd of February before going to a full council for approval, and we invite committee to share any comments. So, Chairman, I'll stop here, and we welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris and Kate and Claire. Chair, Vice Chairman, do we have any questions? Yep. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. As someone who did communications many, many years ago as the NHS Trust, for an NHS Trust, I'm aware of how things have changed in terms of means of communication and the various platforms you have. How do you find that your engagement levels compare with comparable authorities, councils that is? I take it you obviously are involved with talking to your colleagues across the country in similar roles, but I was just wondering, are you hitting the same sort of levels as other counties, or are you better than other counties? I'd like to think it's better than other counties, but perhaps you can tell me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. So it can be quite difficult to benchmark in terms of other counties like Lincolnshire. Certainly, we speak to our district council colleagues and our two unitary authorities neighbouring us at the north, and actually we find that the level of engagement varies quite drastically between different engagement activities, and certainly between some of the districts. Some of them have quite strong resident panels and sort of very engaged groups. Certainly since the last engagement strategy, we've really changed the way that we have sort of consolidated these engagement activities, the launch of the platform, allowing users to register. You know, as Kate said, there are now just over 6,000, which, you know, actually is still growing, but it has only come about in the last couple of years, that panel of 6,000. So we're really keen to sort of continue to grow that. But certainly in terms of other county councils of a similar size, the benchmarking we've done, the conversations we've had, is that it's fairly consistent. But certainly with our neighbours, like I say, it varies quite a lot.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I've got two questions. I'll do one at a time. Since the policy for engaging with under 18s is listed as an action following adoption, what interim measures are in place to ensure young people's voices are not ignored in decisions made during the 2026 launch phase? So working with schools or colleges, for example.
Yeah, so we already do a lot of work with, making sure that children and young people get their voices heard when it's, an engagement activity that's appropriate to them. So depending on what the topic is of the engagement, we know what sort of groups are going to be most affected by the decision, and we'll sort of tap into those networks to make sure we're reaching those people. So certainly the way we engage with younger people is different because they have a very different relationship with their council. You know, especially if some of them aren't yet council taxpayers. So yeah, that methods of engagement are very different. So actually we found that they quite like face-to-face events. So certainly through some of the larger engagements we've done, particularly around devolution recently, we were going into colleges, the university, to have those conversations face-to-face because we found that was much more engaging for that audience as opposed to, you know, expecting them to see our content online through social media. So we're very conscious of using our networks to try and make sure that youth voice is not underrepresented in our engagement activities. And we do track sort of the basic demographic data to make sure that we have got a representative sample of society. So we sort of know throughout different engagements when we do sort of reviews, midpoint reviews, to see where we might have certain areas of our communities missing, and we'll do some targeted to make sure that we're hearing their voices as well, and that certainly includes young people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that reassurance. So, yep, just with so we've got a database of 6,000 individuals that we talk to on a regular basis. What are we doing to make sure that that's not an echo chamber of just them same voices? What is the strategy for refreshing that list with new diverse participants?
Thank you. Yeah. So, like Kate said, the registration on the platform is not a requirement for completing most of our engagement activities, our surveys, and you know, certainly at events we don't require people to register to take their feedback on board. But what we found, the reason we do that is because sometimes that can be a barrier to people, and actually we might hear less feedback from people if we require them to register. We do have what's called the County Views survey, which aligns with County News, the residents' magazine, which online does require registration. So actually every time we do that 3 times a year, we do find an increase in registration aligned with County Views going out. And because County Views takes different topics from different council service areas, so we've done them on waste services, we've done them on public transport, we've done them on services for children and young people. So basing these on various topics, we do find, you know, a crop of new registrations at that time based on those people who are sort of interested in those topics.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. There was a report, a national report in 25 that was talking about lapsed users in this area, so people that have maybe used once and sort of then you never hear from them again. And actually, it sort of links into what you were saying there about actually, you know, we don't always want people to tell us who they are because we want the data. We don't necessarily want to put them off by asking for it. But where we do figure out that actually somebody's maybe used us once and then never come back, is there any sort of model or process for us to sort of maybe capture those, just so we can sort of do some investigations, understand who they are and what's going on? So that's one element there. Also, just with regards to accountability and transparency on the AI aspect, so it states that we've committed to disclosing when our AI is used to analyse public feedback. Who in the council is responsible for auditing the AI summaries to make sure that they aren't smoothing over or sort of dissenting minority voices in the large data sets that they tend to be looking at? I think it's something that keeps coming up, and I keep seeing it when AI, and everyone's still learning really how we adapt to the AI models that are coming forward. But there is always that risk that they're actually going to miss out minority voices, and I'm just wondering who here is ultimately going to sort of take the knocks on that, because you know, I can only imagine that in the future we are going to have some pretty serious cases of risk around that area. So it'd be really good to just get where we're at the moment on that as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor Christopher. So I'll just start with the lapsed users. So, like you say, it can sometimes be difficult because we don't always collect that sort of personal identity, so that personal identification. So, where people are signed up to the panel and they, you know, don't open the emails or they unsubscribe, they don't open their accounts, we do have information in sort of the back end, as it were, to say that they're not a regular active user of the platform anymore. And so we do know where that sort of sits, that, you know, how many of our registered users are sort of in that inactive territory. For me, and I think this comes out in the strategy, but it's about sort of closing that circle. If people can understand that when they are contributing to our engagement activities, what happened after that, they are more likely to take part again because they are actually being listened to. So there's a real focus for us on making sure that the reports are available, it's clear what has been done with that information. So if it has gone into a scrutiny committee to help inform decision making, or that's gone to a service to help shape service provision, being clear about what we've done with that, and also updating that. You know, sometimes services might be able to take some of that feedback initially and do something quite soon after it closes, but then, you know, a bit further, a few months down the line, do something else with that feedback. So providing that update as well to you, so that they know it's not just it's a one and done. We're trying to understand people. So yeah, that on try and lapped users and try and keep people engaged. And certainly we know, like I say, from that back end data about inactive users, actually the proportion is quite small. And as people come in, they may be county views, for example, they may skip one because that's maybe not a topic that they're really engaged in, but they'll come back the next time, or they'll be taking part in other engagements in the in-between. So we do find, unless it's a topic that really does, you know, touch all our residents' lives, certainly highways, waste services, things like that, sometimes we are doing more targeted provision that people don't necessarily have experience with, and so they don't lend their feedback to it. Then in terms of AI, so the way we use AI at the moment in our engagement reporting is we just use it as part of theming, theme analysis of our open text responses. So we manually check at least 20% of them, but certainly if it's a smaller number of responses, we'll do a lot more than 20%, but we've committed to doing at least 20%. And from that, we will know sort of if what the themes that AI is pulling out is way off or consistent with what we're theming them. And what we've actually found is that it is pretty consistent with what our officers would take as themes from these reports. So we're clear that we will not use the AI to make decisions. It's not making decisions. It's essentially looking for keywords in what people are saying, looking for emotive language, things like that, to allow us to better sort of categorize people's comments and then take them into account in a engagement report, rather than just listing all 600 comments or whatever and expecting whoever that decision maker is to read them all. We're actually reading a great deal of them, like I say, at the very least 20%, and the sort of working with that AI model to help categorize the rest, so that strength of feeling based on those different topics is coming through.
Okay, do we have any more questions? No? Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of the item. Suggested proposal. I propose that the committee supports the recommendations to the executive and that we agree to pass on our comments. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah. Councillor Brockman. Yeah.
Chair, can I again abstain, please?
Yep, I've just come to that bit of the voting. That's okay. Okay, we will now vote. Those are all in favour, please raise your hand. Okay. Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you, that is carried. Item 7, Lincolnshire Local Resilience Forum, Business Plan 2023 to 2026, Annual Progress Update. This report is on pages 45 to 50 of the agenda pack and provides an update on the work undertaken by Lincolnshire Local Resilience Forum in respective of the LRF Business Plan 2023 to 2026 Annual Progress Update. Actions required. The actions required by the committee are to consider the comment on the Lincolnshire Local Resilient Forum LRF Business Plan. The report will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer, and Ian Reid, Head of Emergency Planning and Business Continuity. Mark and Ian now to present the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll just do a brief introduction and just always like to set the context in regards to the relationship with the LRF, Local Resilience Forum. As many of you know, that is it's an entity on its own. Local Resilience Forum is made up of all our Category 1 and Category 2 responders. We do bring it here to this committee due to my role as the chair of the LRF and Ian's role as the secretariat of the LRF, and it's an opportunity for us to be able to be transparent in regards to the business planning that we, along with all the rest of the Category 1 partners, do pull together a business plan in regards to our progress. So just wanted to set that context in regards to it, and then I'm going to hand over to Ian to go through our progress report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The strategy and business plan for the LRF is a 3-year plan. It's up for renewal this year, and we are in a draft form with a new plan. The strategic aim of the plan is to really ensure that as a partnership we're able to respond to major incidents and then to minimise the impact on the public, businesses, the environment and property in Lincolnshire. With that in mind then, there's 5 strategic objectives of the plan, and then there are 19 deliverables. The 19 deliverables have always been almost a tactical plan to make sure we achieve the 5 strategic objectives. What I can report is that those deliverables have always been open-ended because of the nature of the work that the LRF does. So a lot of this work, there's not an end to, it's just continuous. But I can report that over the last 3 years, all of those areas are rated green. There are no areas where we have any concerns, and we've been able to achieve some really good objectives during that time. And I just would like to draw your attention to some of the successes that we have had over the last 3 years. The LRF has gone through a period of rebranding. What we've tried to work very hard with local communities is to recognise the LRF branding, and for it, the website that we've developed and all of the publications that we've developed has become a source of information, not just during emergencies, but during peacetime, if you like, as well, so that people see it as a trusted source of information, so that when we do have emergencies, they know where to look for it. All of our partners have links into the new branding, so that it is almost that thread that we use consistently through our publications during emergencies and recovery operations. One of the other highlights has been a community resilience the community resilience officer post that we've been able to establish from DEFRA funding. We're really working hard now, and this officer is dedicated to working with parishes, wards and town councils to help them to produce their own community plans and then provide training for them as well. This has really been a trailblazer project through LRFs in the UK, and we get quite a lot of interest from other LRFs coming to see the work that's been going on here in Lincolnshire. At present, we're up to about 25% of communities that have plans. We've now engaged with 77% of communities, but you can imagine this officer is in post for 2 years. That's quite a lot, and we're already looking at how we can extend funding to carry this project forward. The project's been put in 3 phases. 3 phases because it's been based against our significant risk in the county, which is flooding. So the first phase is for those areas that have been flooded in the past and are at high risk of flooding. The second phase then are in the areas that are at risk of flooding due to EA data, and then the third phase are those that are left. But I would like to stress that these community plans are not just about flooding, they are for use in any emergencies. The other thing that we've really been able to change over the last 3 years and work really hard on is bringing all of our commanders together, both at a tactical and a strategic level, and fostering a teamwork in Lincolnshire, not just with the emergency services, who this is day-to-day business, but with the other partners. And ourselves as LCC are included. All of our tactical and strategic commanders now receive training for their roles during emergencies, built into refresher training as well. And one of the successes that we've had over the last 3 years, the multi-agency Gold Incident Command training, which is usually delivered at the Fire Service College or the Police College, we brought to Lincolnshire for the very reason that we want our commanders not just to know each other via email or at the end of a telephone. We want to bring them together. We want to make sure that they're used to working together. So we run the courses in Lincolnshire and train in Lincolnshire and bring those the Police and Fire Service College to the county. And an extension of that has been the CPD days that we now hold on a regular basis, where again we bring all those commanders together to study risks to Lincolnshire and those areas such as Mark's already mentioned, Manchester Arena and Grenfell, look and study what's gone on elsewhere in the UK, and then what the impacts will be in Lincolnshire. We've also been able to attract innovation funding from central government, 4 lots of innovation funding totaling about 237,000, which has enabled us to look at the development of and use of drones, better prepare our mapping systems and make them more user-friendly to our commanders, and then the development of that website. And I've mentioned before the importance of the website for public and businesses in Lincolnshire. And also now that we've got a better system for use in our rest centres, so that we can, and door knocking systems, if we're in evacuation, incidents requiring evacuation, we can pass information straight from the site through to the county emergency centre. So that's all been really, really good. Ahead of the new plan, we thought that we've undertaken a second gap analysis. We did one before the first plan. We're doing one ahead of the second one. Just looking at the gaps that we might have against the resilience standards at the moment helps us to identify a priority area, any gaps in our planning, and how we can take those forward for the new common objectives. One of the other things that we want to do in the new plan when it's issued in a couple of months' time is linking it in with our current reporting processes. I mentioned earlier around a lot of the deliverables in this plan have been ongoing. We'd like to link it in with our reporting processes through the project groups, just to identify areas of success and any of those gaps, which we can probably highlight a little bit more in that new plan. The other thing that the new plan is going to look at is to look at emerging risks and then Cabinet Office and MHCLG guidance. When I say emergency risks, there's a focus from central government on UK resilience and homeland security. So we think that there'll be partners that are getting involved in the LOF that perhaps haven't done before, looking at power, looking at utilities, looking at food security, and looking at cyber as well. All of those things we're going to have to consider over the next 3 years. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark and Ian. I would now like to invite members of the committee to speak on the report. Vice Chairman, do we have any speakers? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It states in the report that the parish councils have agreed to the fully functioning community emergency plans, but 4 parishes have declined to complete a plan. Was it because they were too small to engage in the plan, or what were the reasons behind only 4 not doing it?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. So, and this was in the first phase. These 4 parishes are in areas where they have experienced flooding on numerous occasions. It's not something that we can make parish ward councils do. We try very hard, and we've been liaising with yourselves, we've been liaising with district elected members as well as our emergency planning contacts. The reasons that we're given is really that they just had no appetite to put a plan together. Now, whether that's because they didn't think they had the resources, I don't know. But that's the only 4 that we currently that have refused, and it is disappointing, but we will keep trying.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bridwood.
Yeah, it's really sort of following on from the other question. Have you done any sort of mapping of identified areas that aren't engaging, and in particular, does that align with areas that don't have parish councils? And are you considering any other means of engaging with communities? I know things that come to mind is church groups, or things like cadet force organisations, because I think they'd potentially be quite, certainly the senior cadets, it might be something they would be interested in engaging with.
Thanks for your question, Councillor. There aren't any specific areas that aren't engaging. There's no pattern to it. What we are doing is, though, and I think I do need to be really honest there, that we've got this dedicated officer for 2 years, with 500 and something parish ward and town councils in the county. This is not a project that we'll be able to complete in 2 years. So what we are doing is looking to DEFRA for an extension of the funding. You know, we have a tiered approach to this. We could go back to the LRF and see if they could fund that project as well. I'm quite confident that we will be able to extend that funding and be able to do that. But the other things that, and the other initiatives that we're looking at as well, is there are a number of partners that go to visit parish councils. So the police have neighbourhood watch teams, fire and rescue have prevention teams, the EA go out, the Environment Agency go out and talk around flooding, and the Lead Local Flood Authority, again part of this organisation, go out. What we are doing is bringing all of those partners together for training days so that they're more aware of what each other does. So when one of them go out, if fire prevention go out, they also have enough information about the Community Resilience Project to be able to send them to us, and we can then go out. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're calling them cluster sessions together, where every quarter we'll go to each of the district areas and we'll try to bring as many parishes as we can together at the same time. So it sort of speeds the project up a little bit, because, and I think I should mention that a lot of this work takes place out of normal office hours, because parish council obviously they're at work in the day. So we've got officers that are working in the evenings to do this. Not all, but we're hoping that these cluster sessions will speed it up. So we do have plans in place to try and extend the project, and secondly, to try and bring other organisations from the LRF partnership in, rather than just being the emergency planning team.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Forgive me, there's a lot of data in this. I have tried to read it last night, but where I live, as far as I'm aware, we don't have a plan, and we're urban. First of all, I've got a couple of questions, but first of all, if there were to be a community group that got together to put one of these plans together, obviously they'd need equipment and they'd need premises to meet that. It comes with a cost. Do we, as a council, do we fund that, or are these community groups meant to find that money themselves? That's my first bit.
Okay, thanks for your question, Councillor. So the way the programme works is, when we've made initial contact with those community groups, we will provide venues and training for those groups until the plan is done. When the plan is complete and it's been validated, they all get an equipment box which contains all the equipment they would need if they were called out during an emergency to help with us. So it ranges from radio equipment to high-vis vests to loud hailers. So they get that right at the very end. So we fund that. No sandbags.
See, that was my point, and it meant to be a criticism, but if a community wanted to get together and do this, and they basically didn't have any money, because where I live, I don't think we have got any money, you know, that's a barrier, isn't it, to doing it? Because, you know, there's that bit about the certain places decline to do it. That might be one of the barriers to that happening if we're not funding it, because how are communities meant to get that money? With the greatest of respect, they perhaps all think that they pay their taxes and they can expect to have that kind of protection.
I think with regards to the sandbags, then it is the local council that they don't have a duty to provide sandbags. Some do, some don't. So we tend not to just go down the sandbag route because it's just one of a way of preventing from flooding. That there are much better ways, and in our experience, most of the time when you're using sandbags, it's too late and the water's already entered property. So we try not to steer people just towards sandbags. We try to put them, we never recommend flood products, but we steer them to places that have better flood products. As far as the other costs, then we would pick up the costs of all that. There's no cost to community groups for provision of the training, for the premises or for the equipment or the replacement of the equipment. So that's all covered.
I think I'm going to come back to you outside of this meeting, because my fear was that there was nothing to fund this. People were just being expected to find the money to do it. But it's not just about flooding, it's about other things, as you say, and perhaps that's something I can make work where I live.
Yeah, if I can just touch on that when we talk about the funding of it. The funding isn't coming directly from County Council budget. It's coming from national DEFRA funding. We've managed to access funding through the local Lead Flood Authority that has accessed this funding directly at DEFRA when we're utilising that. So I just want to be clear that this isn't coming from the County Council's budget. This is coming directly from the DEFRA funding model that we've been able to acquire.
Okay, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got some questions based on recommendations and next steps on page 48. The first paragraph under the forward look, it says that the 2026-2029 plan will move away from deliverables due to the ongoing nature of the work of the LRF and instead will focus on linking to current reporting processes, making progress easier to identify and report. I don't understand what you mean. Could you, that's my first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So at the moment, the 19 deliverables are very generic because of the multi-agency work that goes on. As a programme management board, as part of the LOF that looks after and oversees all of the project groups, they get into more of the detail around what those projects are doing against the deliverables. What we'd like to present to this committee going forward is go into more detail about the work of the individual project groups rather than just keeping it under a generic deliverable.
That's brilliant, thank you. May I continue? Thank you, Chairman. The third paragraph, there's something that reads like a contradiction, but I'm sure it's not, so I wonder if you could just explain it to me, please. It talks about the LRF being a self-funded partnership and no direct costs to Lincs County Council as a result of this report. But then it goes and says, any costs generated by the work in this report are already covered within budget. Now, so there are costs, but there may be a difference between those costs and direct costs. So could you just explain those differences to me, please? It's page 48, the last paragraph.
So the LOF is funded, and this is quite a recent thing actually. Just before we went into this, there was no direct funding for LOFs in the UK. So costs were picked up by all of the partner organisations if they were responding to emergencies or they were covering training. Now central government provide a grant to all 38 LOFs in the county. So this funding comes directly from Cabinet Office. What I can say is that Cabinet Office and MHCRG Lincolnshire in the top 5 LOFs in the UK, and we're one of the few LRFs that received full funding last year. Wow. So a lot of them didn't get the grant that they normally were doing. what the grant has done is enabled the LRF to really get involved and put more projects together and fund more projects. So I've mentioned the innovation thing around drones and mapping. They were always things that we would have liked to have done, but we never had the funding for. So there's lots of pressure for that funding to continue. I believe that it probably will do for the foreseeable future because of the emerging risks and the expectations that LRF will take on and get on involved with more partners and get involved in more of this work. So it's all external funding for the LRF.
Thank you. And my last question, Chairman. You mentioned an innovation fund of 237k. What will you be innovating?
So that again is direct MHCRG funding. And it funds the development of 4 projects which are ongoing. One is use of drones. So the LRF now has drones that is used for, they're not used for during emergencies unless there was a dire need. We rely on police drones. This is for survey work. So for instance, we're going out into flood risk areas and on the coast, overflying those areas, making sure that we know what they look like before flooding, and then we can overfly the same areas a second time when there is flooding. It can tell us how deep the waters are. Also, those drones will be used for submitting pictures straight back into the County Emergency Centre from incident and event sites. The second one, then there was the development of an LRF website, which has proved really, really popular. The hits on that we're getting is much better than it was. The third one is the automation of our rest centre system. So if people have been evacuated, we know that we know where those people are. If they haven't come to rest centres, where they've gone to friends and family, and we can tell them when events are over. And then the fourth one is around the community resilience project that I talked about earlier on. So that was all funding from central government.
Councillor Christopher.
Councillor Brockway has beaten me to the punch on one of her questions there. So what I will say is actually the report looks great, and it's really good to see that Lincoln as an urban centre is noted on there, because I think this actually came up at the last meeting, Ian, didn't it? So we did speak after the meeting on it. It is really challenging to get members of the public in Lincoln specifically with its lack of parishes. So it's good to see that that's noted on there, and it's after our last conversation, it's very clear that you've got a good eye on that as well. So that's reassuring too. I really hope that there is some route towards getting these things in place, especially in Stampend and Booton, where we do have the risk of flooding. I mean, they really are key priority areas for us in the city. And because of the dense population and the lay of the land and the ageing stock of housing, you know, these communities would be devastated if we had a severe flood here. And as it stands, we don't have this community group in those areas to get out there and support each other when that happens, I think is probably the fairest way of putting it, actually. So, yeah, that's really good. I've taken a year almost to get 6 volunteers to join my community speed watch, which is isn't it? We've got people trained now. It's the first one that Lincoln's ever had. It's taken a year to get enough people together to actually get the training and get that off the ground. So, part of me thinks actually some of those people, once they've got used to that, if they're enjoying themselves and they're whatever else, I might be able to sort of point them in your direction. But I know that my fellow ward councillors have shown an interest. They've said it's something that they would like to engage with, and we have met with the team over, I think it was about 2 years ago. But we feel that it can't just be us. We really need to use this as a tool really to sort of capture those individuals out there that really want to get involved and engage in this, and actually living in those specific communities that are going to be most impacted if there is a flood event, really. And certainly Stampend is one of those in my ward for the district. So I'm sure that the district councillors would be willing to meet up with the liaison officer if they're free. So that would be, I think it's something that really needs to be looked at. But yeah, thank you.
That really would be much appreciated, and if there's anything we can do, come out and see community groups, encouraging them to join the scheme, or give them even some more information. We're always happy to do that.
Okay, any more questions? Nope. Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. Suggested proposal. I propose that the committee is satisfied with the contents of the report and is assured of the work undertaken by Lincolnshire Local Resilience Forum in respect of the LRF Business Plan 2023 to 2026 Annual Progress Update, and a further annual update to be brought to the committee in 12 months' time. Can I raise your hands if you would agree? Any against? No abstentions.
Chair, can I just request a comfort break for 10 minutes?
Already on it. Okay, thank you. That is agreed. Now we do have a 10-minute comfort break and we will resume at 11:45. Thank you. correct and we can resume. Okay, thank you again, everybody. Okay, item number 8, Registration and Collaboratory Service Annual Report. This report is on pages 51 to 56 of the agenda pack and provides an update of the service delivered by the Registration and Collaboratory Service 2024-25. Actions required. The actions required by the committee are to review the contents of the report, seek assurance and delivery of Registration and Collaboratory Service 24-25. The report will be presented by James Chappell, Head of Registration, Collaboratory Services and Connery Services. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. The report covers performance for 24-25, developments during 2025, and also a look ahead for the registration service. I'll provide a brief summary of the report, then happy to take any questions. The registration service registered 4,458 births during 24-25, up slightly from the previous year, and 8,464 deaths were registered, a very similar number to the previous year. Performance remained strong throughout the year, with the service exceeding 6 out of the 7 national targets. The only target that wasn't achieved was the deaths registered within 5 days, but as previously explained, bereavement is a very difficult time and we don't pressure anybody to register events. All the other timeliness and appointment targets were exceeded. Ceremonies remained a key part of the service, with 2,401 marriages and civil partnerships being undertaken, and we also undertook 511 citizenship ceremonies. The celebratory service continues to develop with the introduction of new renewal of vows and baby naming offerings. The largest change has come in the digital space with the introduction of a new ceremonies website, which allows couples to plan for their special day. The site is also integrated with our booking system and payment system, so couples can choose, book and pay all online. Further developments are planned for ceremonies with new ceremony types, personalisation, additional services and a customer ceremony planner as well. New digital improvements have also been introduced to the service. Our online offering has expanded. Customers can now book their statutory ceremonies online, as well as prepayment for birth and death certificates and the notices of marriage. Overall, over 85% of appointments are booked online, over 90% of ceremonies are paid for online, and 19 out of the 20 core registration functions have an online route. The only one that doesn't is stillbirths for the reason of that. I would like to say there is still a traditional non-digital route available for all registration functions. The service is added to its customer feedback mechanisms with the introduction of Google reviews for each offices, in addition to the Council's Let's Talk feedback, which is available for both appointments and ceremonies, alongside non-digital routes of in-person and comments as well. We've been working with the LCC digital team on social media and economic development to market our services and attract more business. The service has expanded its use of Google Analytics to better understand user search functions and continues to maximise the GovNotify system for customer engagement, helping drive down calls during 24-25. The service has seen a number of property changes during the year. Most notably was the Lincoln Register Office relocation into Orchard House, as well as the Registration Archive. We've also been working with LCC Children's to co-locate registration services into Family Hub in Gainsborough, and we're working with them on other locations. Registration appointments have also moved location in Louth into Keeley House, and we continue to work with LCC Property as legislative change in the future will impact registration. Once introduced, our current model can change and we'll be less reliant on registration and ceremony accommodation being co-located, which presents more options for registration accommodation in the future. In the legislative space, we've seen changes to the death management process with the introduction of the medical examiner scheme in September 24 and the government's response to the Law Commission review of marriage, which outlines its intention to reform wedding law. We don't know what these recommendations which recommendations will be taken forward, but significant legislative change is needed to make these changes. So we are not expecting any change in the marriage space for several years yet. The biggest change for registration will come from the General Register Office with the move to a digital registration service. Currently, all births and deaths registered have to be done in person. This will move away from this with the informants being able to provide information either via telephone or online. General Register Office is about halfway through their 7-year programme of change. So what will this change be? Paper registers for births and deaths will become electronic, like they are now for marriages. Death information will be able to be provided by telephone. Birth information will be able to be provided online. And the need for informants or residents to attend face-to-face will be removed for many. A new government registration system, which we use in service by registration officers, will also be fully rolled out. It's currently being trialled in Lincoln and across the country for deafs, but it will expand to other registration disciplines in time. Notice appointments, this is what is given before a marriage or a civil partnership. These will be looked at towards the end of the General Register Office's programme. So what does this mean for residents? So we plan to offer residents the choice in the future of how they want to register. At the moment it is face-to-face. We want to offer all of options which the government will enable us to do. So this could be face-to-face, it could be telephone, it could be online, depending on what routes the government takes. This would provide greater access to the service. An example would be that somebody, say on the east side of the county, say in Skegness, wouldn't have to travel for a face-to-face appointment. That could be done over the telephone and could be done by a registration officer who is based in Lincoln. Having this ability will make the service more resilient and be more flexible and adaptable to the residents' needs. We do anticipate a high take-up of these new routes once they are introduced, making the service less reliant on its current property model. In way of timescales, the General Register Office is hoping to start bringing this in by the end of 2026. The Act is already in place, which is the Data Use and Access Act. It is just waiting on the parliamentary time to lay the regulations. So registration service will be transformed in the future, and the service is very future focused. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. I would now like to invite members of the committee to speak on the report. Vice Chairman, do we have any speakers? Yeah. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. On the registration of births, you say that if a birth is outside of Lincolnshire, then it's registered. But I know of 2 births last year where the maternity unit in Lincoln were closed. They couldn't take any new births. So one had to go to Nottingham and one had to go to Doncaster. Now, they were officially going to be born in Lincoln, but they were born outside the county. So now they're not counted in these figures. So surely that skews the figures of how many births we've actually got in Lincolnshire. And then when it comes, doesn't that affect school placements in 4 years' time?
So thank you for the question on that one. And this comes up year on year. So the way that registration works is different to the number of babies that are within Lincolnshire. So there are 174 registration districts in England and Wales. Where the event takes place is where that registration takes place, regardless of then where that baby relocates back to. So you're absolutely right. Our figures are for registrations are less than the number of babies that we have per year in Lincolnshire. And that is due to where our maternity units are sat, or for instance, where they can access or can't access maternity provision. So those events will be registered in the register within those other districts, not within Lincolnshire.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. My question may have been asked some time ago when the statutory medical examiner scheme came into use, but obviously, again, being new, I was just wondering, does this have any impact on the funding? Is it funded externally, or does the council have to fund the fee or whatever for the statutory medical examiner?
No, so it's completely separate. LCC doesn't provide that. It's an NHS function.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Robinson.
Sorry. Yeah, so I had a look at the registration and the wedding website, and that's really well laid out. I just want to comment on that. I won't be looking at it anytime soon, I don't think, but certainly I know it will be there. Just as the Surface plans to expand its licence venue offering beyond the current 100 venues, how will this impact the revenue generated by the council's own ceremony rooms?
So they're two very different venues. People go to a licensed venue for a certain reason. People come to a register office venue for a very different reason. There's a very different price point for both of those, but also the service that each one can offer is very different as well. So we don't see that will impact what we currently do in our numbers. What we would like to have is more venues, more venue types, more options for us to be able to attract new business into Lincolnshire with a wider portfolio of venues. That's really the aim that we're hoping for with this one.
Brilliant, thank you.
Any more questions? Yep, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you. I always find these reports absolutely fascinating. You know, for instance, your mention later in the report about new laws coming in surrounding marriage. I knew nothing about that, so I trot away and I'll find out more information. It sort of triggers more learning, actually. It's very interesting. You put a comment about improvements in accuracy to do with the medical examiner and speed and reporting of death. But you did also mention that improvements have been made, but there are still timeliness issues from deaths that occur in the community. Could you give me a bit of insight into that, please? Why it happens and what happens
So
there?
just a little bit on the medical examiner scheme. So this was brought in to put another layer of scrutiny on MCCDs, which is the medical certificate of cause of death, which is signed by the doctor. So what happens now is that a doctor or GP would sign it, it goes to the medical examiner, it's got that extra layer of scrutiny, so that when it comes to us, we know that we can register based on that. The steps shouldn't put another delay in there. We find deaths that have come through the hospital are very timely. Deaths from the community, they do have a bit of a lag sometimes. Just because of the way they're set up, the GP might not be full-time, so it does take a bit of time to go through. What I can give this committee the assurance is that as soon as it reaches us, we do everything in a very timely manner. So we've developed with LCC Digital a digital reporting tool, so the medical examiner can submit electronically all the details to us. We then get that in, we use the Gov Notify system, so on the same day that it comes in, we text the family member to say that we've got all the documentation and now you can book your appointment. Within that text, it has a direct link to our council's website, so they can go on and book it through that. And then they get all the information through the Gov Notify system once they've booked, whether it be appointment reminders, whether it be all the information that they need, so that when they actually come to us, they're able to complete that appointment and there's no further delays. So, in the answer, we are doing everything we can to get those deaths registered as quickly as possible, but we are still seeing a bit of a lag with the GP side. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Nope. Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. Suggested proposal. I propose that the committee is satisfied with the contents of the report and has been assured of the work undertaken by Registration and Collaboratory Service 2024-25, and that we receive the annual report for 2025-26 in a year's time. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that is agreed. Thank you. Okay. Item 9. We are now going to revert to the sitting of the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006 for item 9 on the agenda. Public Health Substance Use Services and Partnership Working. This report is on pages 57 to 64 of the agenda pack and provides an update on the commissioned drug and alcohol treatment and recovery services across Lincolnshire. Actions required. The actions required by the committee are to note the report which provides an overall of substance use prevention, treatment and recovery work across Lincolnshire. The report will be presented by Lucy Gavins, consultant in public health. Lucy will be supported by Gemma Clark, Community Safety Strategy Coordinator. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So drug and alcohol use can have a significant impact on on an individual, on their health, on them socially and economically. Drug and alcohol use, as we will all know, also doesn't just affect the individual, but their friends and their family, their wider community and wider society. So the paper presents an overview of our specialist drug and alcohol treatment service in Lincolnshire and some of the key partnerships that we have across the county to help us identify people who would benefit from treatment and support them into our treatment services, and also in terms of addressing the national drug strategy which is From Harm to Hope. I'll give a brief overview of the service and summary of the paper, and then I'll take any questions. Our local work then to address drug and alcohol related harm is guided by the national strategy. It was released in 2021 and sets out 3 key priorities. One is to break drug supply chains. The second is to deliver a world-class treatment and recovery system. And the third is around a shift in the demand for recreational drugs. So in Lincolnshire, we work with that national strategy, but we also build on local intelligence to make sure that our local plans to prevent and reduce drug and alcohol related harm are responsive to local communities and the problems that we see locally. We commission a specialist drug and alcohol treatment service. It's funded through a combination of the public health grant and also supplemental grant funding, which comes from national government, from the Joint Combating Drugs Unit. Our service locally is called the Lincolnshire Recovery Partnership, and the overall aim of the service is to provide a place in evidence-based effective treatment for everybody who needs it to support their long-term recovery, and give them the tools and the support they need to overcome a dependency or problematic drug or alcohol use. We also do have a series of preventative interventions for children and young people, for example, through working closely with Stay Safe, and we have a friends and family support service which is there to support people who are impacted by the drug or alcohol use of a close friend or a family member, and to help them to develop coping strategies, safety plans, and rebuild relationships. And that's really important both for the health and well-being of our families and communities, but also for the successful recovery of the individuals in treatment themselves. As you'll see in the report, in the last full financial year, the service supported over 3,500 adults in treatment. We also separately supported just over 200 children and young people. And of specific interest to this committee will be some of the work that the service is doing with partners across the justice sector. So we work very closely with prisons, probation, police. One of the important areas of work that we put a lot of effort into is around supporting people on prison release. So for example, if someone is in drug or alcohol treatment in prison, we talk about it, we call it continuity of care, to make sure that they're supported into treatment in the community so that they can remain drug or alcohol free once they re-enter into society. And our rate on continuity of care is 58%, or for the proportion of people who continue in treatment is 58% in Lincolnshire, which is slightly better than the national average. We've also worked really closely with the police on several initiatives, including through naloxone training. So naloxone is a specific drug that can reverse an opiate overdose. So it's a really important tool in our toolbox, if you like, in terms of preventing people who are from dying from overdoses, particularly opiate overdoses. And then just finally, in terms of that partnership working, in terms of Stay Safe, in the last school year, over 15,000 pupils in schools across Lincolnshire participated in preventative education sessions around drugs and alcohol. So again, that's really important in terms of us raising awareness and supporting young people to have the kind of the tools to stay drug free and alcohol kind of obviously at a young age. That it's really important to have good education support around alcohol consumption. Our drug and alcohol prevention and treatment work is delivered in partnership with several key organisations. So Lincolnshire Police, for example, who we work very closely with, they have a programme of work around, for example, breaking county lines, which is really important to prevent and stop the flow of drugs into the county. We work with courts and probation, so there are specific sentencing pathways that are there to divert individuals into treatment and support, which is evidence to support future offending behaviour. With prisons, I've touched on our continuity of care work. That's, again, evidence to reduce rates of relapse and reoffending. We also work closely with partners in the health sector, so the Integrated Care Board, for example, we work with very closely around drug and alcohol related deaths and also dual diagnosis, so where somebody has co-occurring substance use and serious mental health. We work very closely with LPFT to support those individuals with specialist care. We also more recently have been establishing relationships with specific departments within the hospitals. So members of the committee may have heard, you may have seen in the news that there's an increase in the use of ketamine, particularly in younger adults, and we've got a programme of work specifically focused on preventing the use of ketamine, but also supporting young people who do find themselves using ketamine into treatment and recovery, but also it can cause significant issues, for example, with the bladder. So we've got, for example, a specialist pathway in development with urology in the hospital. So wherever we see a new issue emerging, we will work with partners across the system to address that. And just finally, we work closely we have our housing related support service in Lincolnshire, but we also work closely with Nomad, with night shelters, with YMCA and the district council housing and homelessness teams, because we know that people who are homeless, people who are at risk of rough sleeping, are more likely to also be using drugs or alcohol. So to support them into treatment with assertive outreach. Just moving forwards, we are expecting, I mentioned earlier on that we receive a supplemental grant funding from national government. That's been year on year for the last 5 years, but we are expecting a multi-year settlement for 2026-27 onwards, so for 3 years, and that will help us in a couple of different ways. One, it will give us some security for the future because that grant funding is in the region of 4 million, just under 4 million, so it's a significant amount of additional investment into treatment locally. So it gives us it gives us more information to be able to future plan the service and any further developments that we can make. We're also looking to launch a new Lincolnshire drug and alcohol strategy this year. We are 5 years on from the launch of the national strategy. We've done a lot of work locally, but we've re-looked at our data and local needs, and we're refreshing our own local strategy to make sure that that meets the current kind of needs of Lincolnshire. Prevention remains also a core focus of our service. So stopping any issues before they begin, making sure we've got early access to support for people who need it, and a focus on reducing harms caused by substance use for people experiencing addiction or other problematic drug or alcohol use. I'll pause there and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bridgewood.
Thank you. I'm really impressed with the emphasis you got on partnership work in there and everything. You mentioned the criminal justice system, the police, schools and all that. One thing you didn't mention is, and I think it's quite pertinent for the county, is because we've got the second highest veterans population in the country. You haven't mentioned veterans in that, and there's a couple of things. There is a historic culture within the armed forces of drink, which is one issue, but also there's the issue of PTSD, and that in that case, often the drink or alcohol issue is not the main driver. It's an underlying thing. Is there any sort of investigation into the underlying principles of what is causing the issue, rather than just we'll get them off the drink, get them off that? Is there any follow-up on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So within the treatment service, and that's so within the Lincolnshire Recovery Partnership, but also the work that we do, for example, with LPFT around co-occurring mental health conditions, it's always a really important part of the treatment journey, if you like, to understand what's underlying the behaviour, because it's very rarely it's very rarely isolated. What we often see is, for example, underlying childhood trauma or PTSD. So understanding and supporting those kind of causes, if you like, the causes of the causes, is a really important part of treatment. But it's a good point you raise around veterans, though, because whilst our service is obviously open to everybody, and we will work, for example, with colleagues in LPFT around Op Courage, we to my knowledge, we don't have a specific pathway or anything like that. The service is open to everybody. But what I will do is I'll just take away and ask the service what we can understand about, if we can understand more about veterans within our service, just to be able to give a little bit of, I guess, feedback about who is accessing and what particular supports they might be accessing within the service.
Thank you very much. I am actually involved with an organisation that specifically deals with these sort of issues with veterans. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I'll follow up on that.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just got 2 questions, but I'll do them one at a time. So just with the use of naloxone, was it? The 360 officers are trained to carry it. Out of the total Lincolnshire police force, what percentage does this represent? And is there a target for 100% coverage? And based on the fact that naloxone is safe for anyone, even if they have not taken opioids, is there further coverage to more stakeholders that could be distributed to help?
Absolutely. So I'll take the second question first. We do work with lots of different organisations around naloxone. So police have been one of our priority areas. But for example, we work through our Friends and Family service to support friends and family to be able to carry it. We also do offer out sessions to our housing related support service. Essentially, we also work with, we're talking with Fire and Rescue at the moment about carrying it, and obviously EMAS carry it as well. It's one of those interventions that we are always trying to start new conversations about who could carry it, because essentially it's the more people are out there carrying it in the community, the better. In terms of the total number of police officers in the county, I actually don't know how many we have, and so I'm not sure what proportion of the total that 300 is, but we will absolutely find that out and come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, as long as there's a target to have at least most sort of officers, that would be amazing. Just with the Stay Safe initiative, the team conducted 8 sessions with Year 6, but 122 with the secondary schools. Given that early intervention is a priority, is there a plan to increase the reach within primary schools for Year 6 to prevent issues before the transition to secondary schools? I know that especially my secondary school had problems with drug issues. That was more sort of later on into my school years, but probably like around Year 9. But it's just preventing that once, because obviously in the first few months, I don't want anything to happen during those first few months when they haven't had those sessions. Yeah.
So at the moment, we work with several different years across schools from Year 6 upwards, and it's really important that the education is tailored, targeted to the age group. So we do focus on children in Years 9 and above, because we know then that's when they're much more likely to start to come into contact with drugs or alcohol, or friends might be coming into contact with it. But as the Stay Safe programme develops, we're always looking to make sure that we've got the right coverage for the right age.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, thank you so much, Lucy, for such a detailed report and your comments to back it up. A lot of work's gone into this and it's really informative. I was glad that Councillor Bridgewood mentioned about it not just being affecting homeless people, it actually affects veterans and it affects ordinary families, and we've had this discussion previously, and I really support the Stay Safe educational sessions. And we've got some community work, it's just been done actually, we've just done a whole report where I live, and there are quite significant problems with drugs, and it leads on to so many other things, and we were quite surprised at the level of those problems. I've got a couple of questions first. Looking at this, page 57, the first paragraph, the last sentence does give a lot of information, and it says, for all these reasons, tackling drug and alcohol use is a national and local priority. And if you go on to page 58, I hate doing this while I'm talking, point 3 talks about commissioning responsibilities and services in Lincolnshire. Can I just ask, is delivering this service a statutory duty for LCC? Is it statutory, we have to do it?
It's mandated within the public health grant. So it's technically not a statutory service, but it's mandated within the grant, and there's a specific proportion of the public health grant budget which is allocated to delivering this service.
That leads on to my next one. Does it come under the Integrated Lifestyle Services, 1U Lincolnshire? Because when you look at their key areas of focus, I would have expected it to. Does it come under 1U Lincolnshire?
So the specialist service is commissioned separately to provide drug and alcohol treatment. However, within the Integrated Lifestyle Service, we do also provide alcohol support. So essentially, they provide different levels of care. So within the Integrated Lifestyle Service, it would be for somebody who is drinking at a higher risk level, but perhaps they're not dependent. So we would run a kind of a test with them to understand the level at which they're drinking, and then they could be supported within 1U Lincolnshire if they are drinking, for example, frequently binge drinking or struggling to stop drinking, but they're maybe not dependent, and that would be through either individual sessions or group work. Once people get to a higher level of harm, then the Integrated Lifestyle Service isn't the right place for them to get that support, and they would be supported into our specialist service.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of clarify that. So, because my concern is we've just been out to consultation on 1U Lincolnshire, and I do feel that this is the right place to be raising this because it's scrutiny. And my concern is there's talk about remodelling of the service, and I think that's some people speak for making cuts, and it bothers me. So potentially, if there are cuts to 1U Lincolnshire, that could impact on this service. Am I right in thinking that?
So if there are changes to what's provided within 1U Lincolnshire, it would mean that there would be less earlier intervention, if you like, for alcohol-related harm, and those individuals would need to get support elsewhere in the system. Yeah.
Thanks, that's what I wanted to clarify. And just to make clear that when we come to a vote on this, for that very reason, because I'm utterly opposed to cutting 1U Lincolnshire, I'm going to vote to abstain from this because I'm really concerned about the future of 1U Lincolnshire. But it's nothing to do with this report. I think this is an outstanding report, and I absolutely support all of the work that you do. Thank you.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Reading the report, it brings to mind the fact that back in 1984, when I joined mental health services in Lincolnshire, we had one CPM, sorry, that's community psychiatric nurse, I'm dropping in jargon then, for most of South Lincolnshire. And the way the drug issue and substance misuse generally has grown is just quite shocking, really. And I welcome this report. One thing I wanted to ask about was support for families. I know young people are supported, and particularly people in care are supported, but I was just wondering if you could say a little bit, if not now or maybe after the meeting, about the level of support. I know it's indicated in the report, but I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about how that's working. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely. We launched a new family support service on the 1st of April last year. So it's called Beacon, and it's a specialist family support service for people who are supporting family or close friends with a drug or alcohol problem. It has a broad offer, so it will work with individuals when they first present to the service to understand what they're hoping to get out of it, what support they might need to either look after themselves and or the individual who is going through, who has a drug or alcohol related problem. It's important to note as well that the individual they're supporting doesn't have to be in treatment for someone to access that family and friends service themselves. So for example, if we had a young person, for example, a teenager who was worried about their parents drinking, but their parent wasn't in treatment, that young person can still come into that service for support. And it offers a broad range of support, so everything from some individual one-to-one work through to kind of group work, support with accessing other support that's out there in the community, be that around kind of housing, around benefits, around carers support. So it essentially works with the individual to understand what they're hoping to get out of being in contact with the service, from the service, and then makes a plan with them and will support them over a number of weeks to achieve what they've come to the service essentially to get support with. If someone goes away for a few months and they want to dip back in for support, they can do that at a future point, because also we know that recovery is often not a kind of a linear journey, but for many people they will kind of enter treatment, it will be going really well, they'll have a relapse. So that support is there in an ongoing basis for people as well.
Okay, Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's, sorry to everyone else in here, it's one of the best that I've seen since I was elected, so well done. And actually, it's very comprehensive. It really clearly shows the complex system that you're working with here, with all of these different stakeholders coming together, and reading through it was actually, it was linking to so many other things that I've come across over the last few years. One question that I do have that came out of reading this is centred around policing gaps. So we've just learnt that the plan is to reduce our community policing officers numbers down again, which I'm certainly not in favour of. I think the community policing team do a wonderful job of really holding on to that last link to the community. But of course we rely on those officers from what I've read here to sort of link people through and maybe catch people on the street rather than them ending up being caught shoplifting and ending up in custody. And I suppose my worry is that we're going to miss out on those opportunities if we've got a reduced community policing team. And I just wonder if that's something that you've considered. I was really pleased to hear you mention the ketamine use amongst young people, because that was on my list of questions here. There was another element that came up there, which is the use, the increase in nitazene-based drugs as well. So I'd be interested to learn what we're doing about that, because I understand that not every area is. It's quite a difficult thing to actually check for. Not everyone has the specialist equipment to check for it, so I just wanted to check whether that's in there as well. And just finally, again on the beacon, that's obviously, I think it's 7 or 8 months in. Is that about right?
Yes, it launched on the 1st of April, so yeah, we've got 3 months left of this first year.
To have had so many people make use of that service, there's clearly a need, and I wonder whether actually whether that's highlighting that there's actually a much bigger problem out there, or a much bigger need out there in the community, and whether that's something that we need to look at expanding, and whether we've got the ability to do that as well, if that does become the case.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been pleased with the uptake quickly of the Beacon service, and it is, in terms of, this is our first year, we've got expansion plans in terms of once the service is up and running, kind of fully, and it's gone through its whole mobilisation period, there are ambitions built into the contract to expand the reach and to support more families, more young people, more adults in that service. So that's absolutely built into our kind of first 3-year plans for the service. Just in terms of the nitazenes, so nitazenes, for anyone who isn't aware, are essentially a synthetic opiate. So most opiates that people use within, certainly within the UK, are grown from poppies, but in certain countries and in certain communities, there's been a rise in the addition of synthetic opiates to the naturally produced opiates. Do you want me to pause for a second? What is that? I was going to say it's the best man for the job. But it seems to have stopped, so I'll carry on. We so far have not been significantly impacted in Lincolnshire by the use of opiates that are what we'd call kind of adulterated or laced with nitazenes. Fentanyl is another one that is often kind of, or can be added to drugs, and essentially they're significantly stronger. So some of the nitazenes can be hundreds of times stronger than non-synthetic opiates. So we do have things like test strips, which can be distributed to our opiate using community. We've done a lot of work locally around harm reduction within our drug using community. So for example, around carrying naloxone, which can reverse opiate overdoses, including when nitazenes are involved, although often someone might need multiple doses of naloxone to bring them back round. and it's also something that we have what's called a ELDIS, a drug intelligence system locally, which we work with partners so that if anybody in the area hears about, for example, a fatal or a non-fatal overdose, and where we think nitazines might be involved, for example, we would take it as a sort of hint that if someone did need 3 or 4 doses of naloxone to come around, there's a good chance that nitazines might be involved, then we can put out alerts into the local community. So we'll do that through the specialist service, but we also work with local pharmacists, with primary care. We work with EMAS and with the police to get that notification out there as far and wide as possible so that people know to be more aware. You can, often when we talk to people who've use drugs that are later found to have included nitazines, they'll say things like it looked a bit different, it was a slightly different colour. So we use all of that intelligence to raise awareness about what to look out for as a sort of harm reduction method within that community. So we do quite a lot of work around nitazines, and so far we seem to locally have kind of an approach that's not, that I suppose, that's preventing deaths within that community. And just finally, in terms of the police officer question, it could have an impact. We work very broadly with lots of different parts of the police, and we are kind of with different programs of work in different parts of the service. Obviously, having police officers on the ground in the community is beneficial from a prevention point of view, but at the same time, we're working increasingly closer with EMAS, for example, to make sure that we're building opportunities across different agencies to have people on the ground who are more aware of the harms that are and know how to kind of prevent harm and focus on harm reduction. So whilst we'll have to see how it plays out, but we do have, because we've got a strong relationship with lots of different parts of the police force, I think that stands us in good stead.
Okay, any more questions? No? Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. That now concludes the discussion of this item. I now propose that the committee is satisfied with the contents of the report and has been assured of the substance use prevention, treatment and recovery work across Lincolnshire. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Okay. Any against? And abstentions? Thank you, that is now agreed. We are now going to revert to the citing of the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee for the final item. Community Safety Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 65 to 72 on the agenda pack and sets out the committee's planned work programme for 2026. Actions required. The actions required by the committee are to review and agree the committee's work programme as set out on this report, and highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which may be considered for inclusion in the work programme. The report will be presented by Hannah Colclough, Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chairman. So the next meeting is scheduled for the 24th of February. We have 4 items on the agenda. The voluntary sector annual position report, trading standards fair trading activity 24-25, the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Community Risk Management Plan 2024 to 2028 annual review report, and then we will sit as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee for the Serious Violence in Lincolnshire Duty Progress Report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. I would like to invite any comments on the work programme. Vice Chairman, do we have any speakers? No? Okay. Thank you for your questions and comments, and now this concludes the discussion of this item. Suggested proposal. I propose that we approve the planned work programme for 2026, subject to the consideration of any items highlighted in today's discussion. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That is now agreed. That now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for everyone for attending. This is the end of the meeting. Thank you.